Hi, welcome to Community Homeworks Workshop this evening. We're glad you're joining us. My name is Jason Byler. I am the Education Manager here at Community Homeworks. If you're watching this live, please get down in the comment section and put where you're joining us from so that we know who we're dealing with and who's online with us tonight. We'd like to know who you are. If you're watching this after the live broadcast, we're glad you're joining us there too. But if you put a comment in the comment section, it's probably going to take us a little longer to answer that question or to address the question. You can also, anytime during our broadcast, you can put a question down in that comment section as well. Community Homeworks is a nonprofit organization here in Kalamazoo. We have a mission to empower homeowners to maintain safe, sustainable, and dignified homes. So basically, we want you to be more informed about what's going on in your home, how to get things fixed in your home, and how to not be taken advantage of when you have to pay somebody to fix something. We get our funding from grants and gifts and donations. So if you find value in tonight's workshop, we encourage you to donate at our website. Our website is communityhomeworks.org, and it will probably be running around. Oh, it's running across the screen right now. Nice. Tonight's workshop, we are going to be talking about understanding electrical systems. And our instructor is, you're looking at him. Actually, we've got two instructors, a special guest instructor as well, who looks like he's half asleep right now. I want to welcome my favorite oldest brother to the broadcast, who's joining us from Connecticut. That's another state, in case you wondered. And Kevin agreed to help me tonight to do the electrical class. Kevin works as a contractor in Connecticut and does a lot of kitchens and baths and things like that. But we're really glad you're here, Kev. Thank you for being here. And remember, folks, if you want a question to be answered, you have to write it in the comment section. Kevin, what else do you want to say about yourself?
I think you covered it pretty well. It's good to be here tonight. And yes, I've been working as a carpenter for the last 35 years and probably the last 20 remodeling kitchens. So we get into all aspects of kitchens and remodeling, including electrical, plumbing, drywall, tile, floors, and a lot of coordinating between all of the trades.
Mm-hmm. Just for clarification, are you an electrician? Are you licensed?
Negative.
Okay, so neither of us are electricians, but we both know just enough to be dangerous.
This is true.
Well, maybe not. We will not be talking about how to rewire your house tonight. So if you were hoping to learn that, that's not going to work out for you tonight. We would encourage you to hire a licensed electrician to do any major work that you have in your house. Instead, tonight, we want you to understand what's going on inside your walls. There's a lot of stuff going on there that all has to work together. And if it's not working, it can cause shocks. It can cause fires, things like that. But there's stuff in place to make sure that it's that you're safe in your home. We just have to make sure that we're taking good care of those things and not making bad decisions about what we're doing to, bypassing any of the safety things or anything like that. The first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is where your electricity comes from. Most people know where the power lines are outside your home. They usually come into someplace like up high on your roof. They will have a service entrance that then enters into the meter on the side of your house. This is not the meter, this is just the meter socket. Some houses have it coming from up above, excuse me while I grab another prop, down through a pipe like this. Sometimes it's just through a wire that goes into the top of your meter socket. Sometimes it goes underground and it will come up from under. Whoa, I just broke my meter socket. There we go. Sometimes it will come from below and come up through a conduit or a pipe like this to enter your house. It will go into the meter socket That's how the electric company makes sure that they know how much electricity you're using. And from there, it usually enters what's called a fuse box or a circuit breaker box. We've got both of them here on the wall behind me. If you live in an older house, especially here in Kalamazoo, you're probably familiar with one of these. They've got these little round fuses in them. And when one of those blows, it turns off your electricity to part of your house. Kevin, what's the thing that we used to find, or we used to hear about people doing to bypass the fuses in their house?
We're not supposed to be talking about that, Jason.
So we've seen people who take the fuses out and bypass them by putting a penny or a coin or something like that in there. You don't want to do that. That fuse is there to protect you. And when that fuse blows, you want to make sure that you can actually unscrew it. You can usually look closely on the fuse itself and tell whether the filament is broken or not. I don't think my camera's zooming in enough for that. But you want to replace it with the same size fuse that was there before. You don't want to change that fuse size unless an electrician tells you to change that fuse size. So you want to go to the hardware store, say, this is the size I need. I need a 30 amp fuse. I need a 20 amp fuse, whatever it says, and replace it with the same exact fuse. I usually encourage people to have a couple extras hanging around the house because, you know, it's always going to be at a time when you can't get to the store to pick one up and it's going to blow. The fuses are a little tricky because once they're blown, they're blown. You can't reuse them. You got to throw it away and get another one. Whereas the circuit breakers, which are the new style, they have basically it's a switch, and that will flip and turn off the power to part of your house if it draws too much current or if there's some sort of a fault in your line. What do you want to tell me about that, Kevin? You look like you're getting bored.
What was the question?
Well, I was just asking what else you want to tell us about circuit breakers or about fuses.
The only thing I was going to add is sometimes it's not real obvious when the circuit breaker is tripped because it won't go all the way to the off position. It'll just go to the middle, and sometimes you have to physically turn it off and then back on again in order to reset them.
A lot of them have a little red window, or a little window that has a little red dot. And so you basically just have to go up to that. You can kind of see one of them will be sitting in the middle just a little bit. You'll have to flip it all the way off and then back on. So it has to go both directions or else it won't reset. And those are there to protect you. Those are there so that you hopefully don't get a shock, hopefully don't have a fire in your house. Once again, you want to make sure that you're not trying to hold that thing on with tape or anything else. You want to let that thing flip on its own however it wants to flip.
And if it doesn't reset, then it usually means there's a short that's still active in the circuit, and you want to get an electrician to look to check it out.
All right. Usually the different circuit breakers or the different fuses are for different areas of your home. So in a perfect world, it would be, okay, we have one fuse that's for one bedroom, and another fuse that's for the kitchen, and another fuse that's for maybe the living room. We know we don't live in a perfect world, so that's usually not the way it is. They'll have all kinds of things, especially with that old wiring. They'll have things, oh, you might have the refrigerator tied into the same fuse as the bedroom, or you might have the bathroom hooked in with the furnace or something crazy like that. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that. How do you figure out which circuit breaker you're dealing with, Kevin, if you need to shut one off for some reason?
Hopefully they're labeled.
Hopefully they're labeled. They are supposed to be labeled, and you can label it yourself. If you get to your circuit breaker box and they don't have any labels on the door or next to the circuit breaker, you can figure it out yourself instead of having to hire somebody to do it. The way that I've had the most success doing it is take something like a radio, plug it into the outlet, turn the volume way up so that you can hear it wherever your circuit breaker box is, in the basement or wherever, and go down there and start flipping them until that one goes off. And you know, okay, right in next to that, okay, that's the one for the outlet in the bedroom because that's where I had the radio plugged in, and then go to a different one and try that. Electricians do have a special tool that they can use to track that as well. But you know, why pay somebody to do it if you can do it yourself? Let's see. What else do we need to talk about with circuit breakers? Oh, there's usually a main circuit breaker as well. And that is usually a larger one at the very top. It's usually 100 or a 50 or a 200. And that, if you flip that breaker, it will shut off the power to your entire house. So you usually don't want to do that. There are people who have generators that they have hooked up to their homes, and sometimes the generators will require you to turn that off to make sure that you're not feeding power back into the line and shocking whoever it is that's trying to fix the line out there in the world.
That will also generally designate what size service you have. Some people have a 100 amps. Some of the newer systems are 200 amp. It's usually governed by whatever number is on that breaker.
And otherwise, the other breakers also have numbers on them, and those are also designating how many amps or how much current can go through there before it flips the breaker in for the safety thing. So you don't want to have somebody switch those out unless they know what they're doing. You don't want to open up that panel box unless you really know what you're doing. And while I'm saying that, I'm going to go open up the panel box. Our panel box here is not live, so I can't get shocked from it, which is a good safety thing for me. But it does show you a little bit of the insides of it. There are usually 3 wires coming in from outside, from out at the pole or wherever you get your power from. It will have 1 wire coming down onto the right-hand side of the panel, another wire going down the left-hand side of the panel, and then it will have what's called a neutral that's usually tied in at the top or the bottom of the panel. That neutral is also usually bonded to another metal wire that's usually something like this, usually copper. And the copper colored wire is the ground, or what's the other name for it? I'm trying to get Kevin's input and he's not wanting to talk.
You're doing very well, Jason.
Okay. But that is usually connected to a post that's driven down into the ground to prevent shocks. And so that if there is a short somewhere, instead of it shocking you, it's supposed to go through that wire and down into the ground. When we're talking about electricity that's coming into our house, there are 2 different sizes of circuits that we can have. Most of our circuits in our house that are running things like our electrical outlets, our switches, things like that are 110 volts. You can also, so you will have 110 volts coming down the right-hand side, 110 volts coming down the left-hand side. If you have a double breaker like this is a 220 breaker. Is it backwards? It is. That 220 breaker is if you need 2 times the 110 volts. So it will get 110 volts from the right-hand side and 110 volts from the left-hand side, and it will give you 220 volts total. That's what you would need for running an electric range, like a stove in your kitchen, If you have an electric water heater, it might be that. A clothes dryer, some air conditioners like the central air usually requires a 220 volt as well. And it's basically just one breaker that is tied together and turns on both sides there. Anything you want to add, Kevin?
No, it looks like you're covering it all. I'm learning a lot tonight.
Oh, great. I wanted to talk a little bit about light bulbs, because bulbs, or lamps as people call them, are one of the things that homeowners have to replace all the time, right? Traditionally, we used these incandescent bulbs, and they were great, but they remained unchanged for, I don't know, probably 100 years. They have, on my drawing back here, I don't know how well we can see this. Basically, there's a black wire or a hot wire coming in to the bottom of the bulb, and there's also a neutral wire. So every circuit that you have is connected to that hot wire and that neutral wire on one of the sides of your circuit breaker box. So with a light bulb, the hot is coming in to the bottom, the neutral is coming in to the side, and when the current passes through the through a little filament inside there, it glows. So that's pretty cool. The only problem is it produces a lot of heat. And so those of you who have used these a lot know that, okay, we're going to touch that bulb and we're going to get ourselves burned if we're, if we don't let it cool first. So now we've got a lot of different kinds of bulbs that are a lot cooler running and are more efficient, because some of that electricity is being used to produce heat in the old incandescents. For a while, we had these little squirrely ones. Do you have any of these in your house, Kevin?
I might have a few left. We're trying to get rid of most of them.
So this is a compact fluorescent bulb, and it requires electronics inside of it to light up a gas that's in this little tube. So it's a little bit of a different design than your incandescent, but it basically does the same thing. The old ones used to take a little while to turn on. They would be like get real dim and then brighter, 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 brighter until they get up to temperature. But still much more efficient than these old incandescents. Now everything is going to LEDs, and the LEDs look a lot like the incandescents, but they've got electronics in them too that are basically lighting up just little diodes, little tiny light emitting things in there that produce the light. When these guys first came out, they were pretty expensive. I remember going to Menards or somewhere like that and seeing, oh, I could get an LED bulb for like $24 for one bulb. Whereas I could go get a pack of these, 4 for $2 or something like that. So, but the prices have come way down on the LEDs, and now you can get them for basically the same price as the incandescents. So it's pretty cool. But these use just a fraction of the electricity that that the incandescents used. I got a message saying we've got a couple questions. So if we could have one of our questions pop up, we can try to answer a question. Daniel says, how safe is knob and tube wiring? Good question, Daniel. Kevin, do you want to talk about knob and tube a little?
I haven't run into much knob and tube. Any knob and tube that we've run into, we pretty much ripped out and replaced with the newer Romex style. So I would say it's probably not a good thing to be using. There's not most of the insulation on the knob and tube is normally dry rotted and gone by now. That's a very old technology. So knob and tube was used back in the early 1900s when electricity first came into homes. That's when they used a lot of knob and tube, and it actually is pretty cool because it probably would last as long as or longer than the newer Romex style, because it requires you to have two different wires
run through the walls. They never come in contact with each other. So you have one neutral and one hot running side by side, side by side to the different fixtures. The problem comes in when, like Kevin said, it loses insulation. So you can see on this piece here, the insulation's coming off and something gets against that. Or it just builds up enough dust that it can short something out. They're usually far enough apart that they don't bridge and get connected. But oftentimes people will blow insulation into their walls or do that sort of thing. And that insulation basically makes this so that it can't stay cool. The idea behind knob and tube was, in addition to insulating it from the other wires, it would allow the heat to dissipate away from the wires. So you don't want knob and tube any place where there's insulation. You want it only in open cavities. And if you're able to replace it, it's a good thing to replace. I do know that in our area, there are a lot of homes that still have knob and tube, especially places that are inaccessible. And there's rules that you don't have to replace it unless there's a problem or unless you're upgrading. So people who are having a new circuit run, they'll usually, okay, we're just going to replace all the knob and tube at the same time. But I mean, I was in a house a week ago that had knob and tube all through the basement, and it was working fine there yet. I think the big thing with knob and tube is you don't want anything coming in contact with it. So you want it protected inside a wall, inside an attic, something like that. You also want to make sure that you are running it through either a fuse box or a circuit breaker so that it can trip if there's any kinds of an issue. But good question, Daniel. Thank you for that. I hope we answered it enough. What other question do we have? Oh, Karen Smith is joining us. Welcome, Karen. Nice to see you. I had a circuit breaker box installed and upgraded to 200 amp by a local reputable electric company some years ago. My stove and my oven has a dedicated switch. On holidays, if I have the oven on along with the 4 burners, every time it trips the switch. How come? So basically what Karen is saying is, on a holiday, if she's running the oven and all 4 of her electric burners, it's tripping her breaker. What do you want to say about that, Kevin?
Well, my guess is that it's probably just overloading the circuit. It's probably on a, if it's probably on a 30 amp circuit. A lot of the new stoves and some of the larger stoves are going to 40s, and some of them are even 50s. Some of the induction cooktops that we've been installing are 50 amp or more because they draw so much more current, although they're more efficient. So yeah, I'm guessing that it's just overloading the circuit unless there's some faulty wiring somewhere in the stove itself.
The fact that it's not tripping the breaker when you're using it with fewer than 4 burners, or when it's not going full speed, would make me think that the electrical wiring in the house is probably okay and the breaker is doing what it's supposed to do. I'm guessing that if you're wanting to fix that problem, you would have to have an electrician come and run a new circuit with larger wire to your stove and have a larger breaker installed. The breaker is the number on the breaker is determined by the size of the wire and how much amps the wire can hold. So if you're blowing that breaker, it means that it's trying to pull more amps than what that wire is made for. So I hope that answers your question, Karen. Do we have any other questions coming in? Oh, Jules is here. Nice, Jules. It's nice to see you too. Most of the outlets in our older home are 2-prong outlets. Can a homeowner safely upgrade to 3-prong outlets, or is that a job for an electrician? Awesome question, Jules. Thank you for asking that. Kevin, what are you going to say?
Generally, it's not a hard thing to add if your boxes are grounded. I've run into only one home so far in your area where there were no grounded boxes, so grounding the box didn't give you a ground. Generally, if there's the metallic cable, which is called BX, normally that BX cable acts as a ground, or normally the newer Romex wire has a ground in it that will be grounded to the box, and then you can take a wire from the box to your green prong on your outlet, and then you can upgrade the outlets very easily.
So once again, it's a limit on the wiring, not on the outlet, not on the breaker. It's a limit because of the wiring you have. So the old knob and tube, and even the old what did you call it? The BX?
Yeah, the armored cable, the metal jacketed cable is no, that's not BX.
Is that it? Okay.
Do you have any of the armored cable there? It looks like it has a metal jacket on it.
No, I don't think I do. I've got some metal conduit, but that's all.
It looks spiny.
Okay. So that would allow you to tie back into the ground. And you were talking about the newer cable. Let's see if I can get a piece here. I've got some newer cable here. This is some Romex from recent. So you have the white wire, that's the neutral. You have the black wire, which would be the hot wire, and then a copper colored wire, which would be the ground. And those all run back to the circuit breaker independently. But the idea is that if you get a big differential between the ground and the neutral, it will help to trip the breaker and prevent you from getting a shock. But if we don't have those, if we only have two wires run and it doesn't have the armor on it, basically, what do we need to do? Can we just go hook in a 3-prong and not put anything on the, oops, that's the 2-prong. Put in a 3-prong and not have anything connected to that ground screw? Does that work, Kevin?
No, that won't give you,
okay.
It'll work, but it's not correct. You need to attach a wire from the green ground screw on the bottom of your outlet to the box or to the ground wire that's coming into your receptacle, into your electrical box.
Okay. So basically you would have to run more wiring or somehow get another ground wire there. What about if you, I've heard of people taking out the 2-prong outlets and putting in a GFCI, a ground fault circuit interrupter outlet. Does that work?
That could work, but you still need a ground.
You still need a ground. So the ground fault circuit interrupter, in my understanding, it recognizes minute differences between that ground and the neutral wire. And if it does that, it will trip the little button, or the button will pop out, and that is a protection thing for you. So I have heard of people putting these in. It's not quite correct, but it's better than just putting in an outlet without hooking anything up to the ground and not having any kind of protection. There was something else I was going to say about that. Oh, I know what it was. So Kevin, what if I just go and get one of these little guys, these little adapters, and plug that into my 2-prong outlet? Am I all good to go now?
That is what a lot of people do, but technically that little screw on the bottom, that little tab on the bottom needs to be screwed into your receptacle, which would also ground it if your receptacle is grounded, either through the screw or through the box.
I may have seen a few of these in use at your parents' house, Kevin.
I think your parents have some of them too.
But a lot of people do that. If you're only plugging in things that have 2 prongs, you don't need that 3rd prong. But technically, if you have anything that plugs in with 3 prongs, you don't want to break that 3rd prong off. I've seen people do that too, because that's removing all of your safety mechanisms. Instead, you want to make sure that that is connected up to a ground so that so you're safe. It's one of those things in your home that is an easy, safe thing to keep around. But if you're bypassing that safety, it's not going to be there to help you. Any other questions, Kaylin? Dorothy Jordan, you talked about larger appliances requiring a 220 breaker. If you have central air installed for the first time, it requires a 220. Is an HVAC person authorized to do that to your breaker box, or do I need to involve an electrician? Another great question, Dorothy. Kevin, do you know what the rules are in your area? Now, Kevin's in a whole different state, so it might have completely different rules than Michigan. But I can tell you,
way up in New England.
Right.
Generally, some HVA persons are trained in working with them. I think you probably want to leave that up to your contractor if he's comfortable with doing it or if he's licensed to do it. Otherwise, yes, you may need to get an electrician to do the final connections.
I'm actually planning to get a central air installed in my house this summer. And the HVAC person that I talked to said I could do it, but it's going to be more expensive if I do it. So here's here's a couple of names of different electricians who could do it for you, and it will save you some money. So if you're working with a licensed HVAC person, they're going to know whether they are able to do that or not. They're not going to hook something up and say, oh, well, it's good enough. They have to do it all up to code. So Dorothy, if you're having something like that installed, talk to the HVAC person, ask if they would like to run it, or if you need to get an electrician involved.
Just to be clear too, HVAC, for people who may not know, stands for what, Jason?
Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, right. We need to not use our abbreviations. Any other questions, Kaylin, or is that it? I don't remember where we were. I think that's all the questions.
We were talking. Maybe you want to mention a little bit more about your GFCI.
All right.
Generally, those will only be required in a bathroom or a kitchen. It is a safety mechanism. If in case you drop your hair dryer in the sink, you won't get electrocuted. Or also in the kitchen, you'll see a few of them. Generally, you'll see one on each circuit. I don't know about your area, but in our area now, they're starting to get more strict on a new type of system, which is called arc fault, but that's a whole other safety mechanism that normally is starting to be required in bedrooms and now in kitchens. But it's another safety mechanism, one step above the ground fault circuit interrupter that you mentioned.
So the ground fault circuit interrupter, you said, they're supposed to be in the kitchen and in the bathroom.
Any wet areas.
In any wet areas. Okay. So if you have a laundry in the basement, you should probably have one there too. Is that right?
Correct. The laundry sink, or a lot of times they'll be in the garage or near anything outdoors is going to have a GFCI. And you can either get a receptacle or you can get a GFCI breaker also. Usually they're a different color in your panel box, yellow or blue. We have a lot of blue ones in here, and those will offer the same protection.
But that offers it for the whole circuit instead of just one outlet.
Correct. And you can wire your kitchen circuit off of the load side of the GFCI, so you don't need one of those receptacles for each plug. It's like putting protection on every outlet that's connected downstream of where the circuit comes into your kitchen.
So this is probably not something that our homeowners are going to be doing is hooking up a GFCI in a chain in their kitchen. But I like to let people know that if your outlets in your kitchen, if your receptacles are not working, it may be that they're all tied through one GFCI. So if you figure out which GFCI that is and push the reset button, it might turn all of your breakers back on or all your outlets back on. Or you need to check your circuit box, your panel box, or if you have fuses, check your fuses because it could be a blown fuse or a tripped circuit breaker as well. So what's the difference between GFCI and arc fault, Kevin?
From what I understand, it's just more, it detects more, less of a current variance between the two. Without getting too technical, a lot of times some of the older kitchens that we have will share a neutral between two circuits, which is perfectly okay, but you can't do that when you have an arc fault, because whatever current is coming in has to be the same current that goes through the neutral, and anything different will trip that. So they're very sensitive, and
okay.
They are requiring them for new circuits here when we're doing new construction for bedrooms, and it keeps little kids from putting paper clips or screwdrivers or whatever in and shocking themselves and getting hurt.
Okay. And I know that we're now using all the tamper resistant outlets as well. Some of the outlets actually have like a little piece that covers up the hot and the neutral blades, to try to help keep kids from putting things in there that shouldn't be in there. I'm guessing the arc fault is a little bit more effective than just putting that in there, but every little bit counts, right?
Correct.
I wanted to talk a little bit about light fixtures because most of us have lots of lights in our homes, lots of places where we're flipping on the lights, but we talked a little bit about bulbs in the past. We were talking about the LED bulbs and the incandescent bulbs. Most light fixtures in your home will have a label on them near the socket where you screw the light bulb in that will say what size light bulb you can use, and that's the wattage of the light bulb. So it would say, oh, maximum 100 watt bulb or maximum 60 watt bulb. One of the cool things now is with the LED bulbs, because they're using like, okay, we've got the light of a 60 watt, but it's only using 7 watts of electricity or something like that. Technically, you could go up much brighter, have a much brighter light in that same fixture. But you do want to look at that and make sure you're not putting a light bulb in there that is a higher wattage than what the fixture is made for. So it has to be the actual wattage rather than the wattage where they say, oh, it's the light of a 60 watt bulb. It has to. You want to think about what the actual wattage is for that thing. What else do we have here? Did you want to add anything about lights, Kevin?
No, it's just if you have the opportunity to upgrade your bulbs to LED, they come in all kinds of different shapes and colors and sizes. They're so much more efficient than the old bulbs. It's one of the cheapest upgrades that you can do as far as saving energy. And they pretty much come in every shape and size, including the clear bulbs for your dining room, and they're even making Edison bulbs, which are the bulbs where you can see the filament that look like the old style bulbs, and they're making them in LED now. So it's actually a very good idea to upgrade to them.
Good idea. If you are for those of you who are watching, if you are a Consumers Energy customer, Consumers Energy has a program where you can have a technician come out to your home and they will help you upgrade lights to LEDs. They'll help you put in a low flow shower head and aerators on your faucet and all kinds of things to help you save money. But I did that a few years ago, and that's how I really got kickstarted in doing LEDs at my house, was having consumers come in, and basically they give you all this free stuff and say, here, save some money. So that's pretty cool. but it's a good resource to have. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the boxes that are inside your walls. So back behind me here, I've got switch boxes that are rectangles. I've got one here that's an outlet box that's a rectangle. Some boxes are round, like this one up here. Those are usually for lights or for if you have hardwired smoke detectors, that sort of thing. Where else do they use round boxes? Ceiling fans. Ceiling fans require a special box. So if you're adding a ceiling fan or a ceiling fan fixture to your house where you had an existing light fixture, oftentimes you have to upgrade to a more stable electrical box. Otherwise, if you have one of those round boxes in your ceiling and you hang the ceiling fan on it, the vibration can make the whole box fall out of the ceiling, which tends to not be very good for people. So they have some really cool ones that actually have to fasten into the framing to keep it there. So that requires a little bit more work than most people think. Oh, well, I'll just put a ceiling fan up where my chandelier had been, and it's a little different than that. If you have questions about that, you can ask it at the box stores at Lowe's or someplace like that. You can also do research online to figure out what box you need if you're adding a ceiling fan, or play it safe and have an electrician help you do that. But not necessarily an impossible task for most homeowners. Let's see, we already talked about GFCIs. Dimmer switches. Do you have any dimmer switches in your house, Kevin?
I've got a couple, yes.
What happens when you hook that dimmer switch up to your ceiling fan?
It doesn't work very well.
So there are two different switches that are, one is for lights and one is for ceiling fans. If you hook the light dimmer up to the ceiling fan, it makes a horrible noise and doesn't work very well. So usually the ones for the ceiling fans are more expensive, but it's something to keep an eye on as well. Is changing a light switch into a dimmer, is that something you should have an electrician do, or is that something that most homeowners could do?
Most homeowners should be able to do that. You just have to make sure you get the right type of dimmer. Some of the new LED fixtures require a special dimmer. You want to make sure when you're buying the dimmer that it's rated for LED, so that you don't have a problem with the lights flickering or flashing. If you do have a problem with that, it's normally a problem with the dimmer not being correct.
Okay. And anytime you're going to be working on electrical, anytime you're changing out an outlet or anything like that, first thing you want to do is turn off the power to that spot. So you need to figure out where that is before you do any other work. You don't want to be working on a live circuit. We do offer a class here on how to change outlets and switches. Unfortunately, with us being virtual like this, it's really hard to do that kind of a hands-on workshop over the internet. So we're hoping we get out of this COVID thing and can get back in person soon, so that we can have Harry come out and teach us about how to change outlets and how to fix our light fixtures and all that kind of stuff. He loves doing it. It's a lot of fun to do.
There are a lot of YouTube videos out there that are very good for things like that, if you're just wanting to learn the basics.
How do you know if it's a good YouTube video or not? Because there's also a lot of YouTube videos out there that are things that you don't want to be listening to.
You have to use your own good judgment.
Well said. Well said. Kaylin, do we have any other questions coming in yet? I guess not. If you have questions, make sure you're writing them in the comment section. We'd love to try to help you out with those. Most of our houses in Kalamazoo, we have a lot of older homes, and most people have battery operated battery operated smoke detectors or battery operated carbon monoxide detectors. But I know in new construction, they are required to have everything wired into, basically you have a separate circuit that is for your smoke detector circuit, and they're wired directly in. They usually have a battery backup, but there's also other things there's all kinds of weird things out there now that I've seen where you can actually have a battery operated smoke detector and have another one somewhere else in the house, and they're able to communicate. And if one goes off, the others go off, which is what the wired ones are supposed to do. So if you have a wired smoke detector in your house and Kevin burns the toast in the kitchen, it's going to set off the smoke detectors in the whole house, not just the one next to Kevin's toaster. So it's another one of those safety things to help you know when your toast is ready. But they've got some really neat ones now that are tied together, even if you don't have the interconnected ones that are wired. Do you have any experience with smoke detectors, Kevin?
Just basically what you said. The hardwired ones, normally one smoke detector will set off all of them so that you get an alarm everywhere, and it does have a battery backup in case you lose power. But I'm glad you did mention that you use that to figure out when your toast is done.
Right. No, you do. We talked a little bit about knob and tube wiring in the beginning of this session and whether it's safe or not and when to replace it and all that. Are there other styles of wiring that we should watch out for other than knob and tube and replace it? Or is there like, okay, this style is okay, this style is not? I know that they've done a lot with using different colors of wire in your walls. Are there certain colors that are better than others, or how does that work?
The colors usually are, from what I understand, they were designed so that inspectors could just look at the wire and decide when they're doing their inspection what gauge wire it is. The yellow wire will normally be a 20 amp wire or for a 12 gauge. The white wires now are 14 gauge. Then they have an orange wire that's going to be a heavier gauge, and so on and so forth. But yeah, there are still other older types of wire that have very brittle insulation in them. A lot of the older homes have them, and those become a little tricky to work with because they short out. Especially, we see a lot of that in above old ceiling fixtures, where the heat from the ceiling light in the kitchen will just make all the insulation brittle, and as soon as you touch it, everything starts falling apart. And so you have to go in there and either replace the wire, or sometimes we'll try to put heat shrink on the wires to protect them, and so on and so forth.
But that's another one of those places where if you get into that, where you're replacing a fixture or replacing a switch or something, and you find that all of the insulation is falling off, probably not something that you're going to be able to fix yourself. And at that point, you're probably going to have to call an electrician. At least that's been my experience. There's also a lot of other wires that are in people's homes, and it gets a little confusing looking around in your basement or in your attic and seeing all these different wires. We've got wires, the round coax cable wires. This is for your cable TV, and some internet comes through with cable like that. We've got Cat5 cable or Cat6 cable, and this is usually used for internet. So if you've had internet installed recently, it might have something like this. It won't necessarily be blue. It might be brown, might be gray, might be white. I've seen all different colors of it. Very similar to phone cord. Phone cord's a little bit thinner than this, but it will come in all different colors as well. And we'll be, going through to different places in your house. For some reason, my house is wired completely with phones in every single room, I think. And now that nobody is using those kinds of phones anymore, it's like, okay, we've got all this extra wire. You know, most people are just using cell phones instead of having a plug-in phone, or maybe a plug-in phone one place and that's it. I'm trying to think of other wires that we might have in our home that people would see in their basements.
TV cable.
TV cable. I already mentioned the coax.
You may have low voltage wires from your doorbell going into the transformer.
Good. I forgot about doorbell wiring, and also low voltage for your furnace thermostat. So there's a wire going from your thermostat to your furnace that would be low voltage as well. So if you decide to start cutting wires, make sure you know what you're cutting, because if you cut those, you're going to have a cold house, or else your doorbell will stop working. What else do you want to add, Kevin?
I was going to type in my own question, but I'll leave that for the end.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to do it now, but or you could just ask your question.
I was going to ask you how to install the clapper light switch.
Oh, the clapper. Is that still around? I haven't seen that in a while.
I think not recently.
Not recently. For those of you who don't know, the clapper was one where you could, and it would turn your lights on or off, so you didn't have to get up. But now they've got all kinds of smart switches now, so that you can get on your phone and turn the lights off in your kid's room, or turn the lights on in your kid's room. Not that I would ever do that, but maybe my wife would, in theory. I'm not sure you need the clapper anymore. You can just do it all with your smartphone. Well, I think we're getting to the end of our time here. Do you have anything else you want to add, Kevin, or any obnoxious questions that you want to ask?
No, I think I'll keep those to myself. You've done a very good, thorough job, and I hope people have learned something.
I hope so too. If you do have questions later on, please, you can still add them in the comment section, and I will read them in the coming days. I wanted to thank Kevin for joining us. Again, if you joined us late, this is my favorite oldest brother joining us remotely from Connecticut, way up there in New England. And is it snowy there yet, Kevin, or has it all melted like it has here?
It's supposed to be 60 degrees tomorrow, so yeah, most of it has melted.
Okay. So I wanted to thank you again, Kevin, for joining us. I wanted to thank everybody out there who's watching, and the great questions we got. We really appreciate those questions. It helps our class go a lot more smoothly, and it makes it more fun. Also, I wanted to thank Kaylin, who was our behind the scenes person tonight, and running things from back behind the not behind the camera, but behind the computer, I guess you could say. So thank you very much, Kaylin. Next week, we will have another workshop coming up. I believe we're on to the first workshop of the month. So we're going to be talking about, we're going to have a roundtable discussion with different of our instructors coming in and talking about what to look for when you're hiring a contractor so that you're not taken advantage of, and what questions to ask them and those kinds of things. So get your questions ready now, and we will try to answer those next week. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.